Before Christmas, the girl went to her bedroom and disappeared without a trace in the middle of the night. The case immediately attracted enormous attention, and more than 3,000 people came out to search for her. Meanwhile, detectives found out some shocking facts, which eventually led them to the unraveling of this high-profile story. Friends, after watching, I recommend you to check out my Telegram channel, where I publish for you daily interesting crime news from around the world without censorship. The link is in the description. Sarah Foxwell was born in the American city of Salisbury, Maryland. She grew up in a very large family. The girl had 2 sisters and 4 brothers. In addition, her mother had 3 more children from a previous marriage. However, Sarah's parents separated, causing her mother to experience serious hardship. Not only did she have to provide for all the children alone, but she also had to look after them. She had to work hard, so the children were often left to live with relatives. Sarah was the middle child and the most positive among the other children. When her brothers and sisters quarreled, she tried her best to reconcile them, and most often the girl succeeded. In December of the 2009 year, when Sarah was 11, she and the other children moved to her aunt and grandparents for a while. Christmas was coming up, and her mom was working harder than usual. She wanted to buy presents for each child, so she took extra shifts. Aunt Sarah lived on the outskirts of Salisbury in a big farmhouse. The children loved the place. The house was on a large property, so there was almost limitless space for them. December 22nd was a very ordinary day. Christmas was only 3 days away, and the children were in high spirits. They were running around the house, playing and having fun. Their aunt ordered them pizza for dinner, and at about 9 o'clock in the evening, they started getting ready for bed. Sarah slept in the same room as her 6-year-old sister Emma. It was at the very end of the hallway, near the back door. The girls chatted for a while longer and fell asleep. The next morning, Sarah's grandfather woke up and went to wake the children. He went into Sarah and Emma's room, but found only the younger girl there. The man thought that Sarah had already woken up. However, she was nowhere in the house. He told her aunt, and together they started looking for the girl, looking in every corner. When she realized that Sarah was not at home, her aunt thought that the girl might have gone outside to play with the snow that had fallen overnight. But the woman quickly realized that her shoes and jacket were at home. Soon the aunt noticed one very strange thing. She looked into the bathroom and discovered that Sarah's toothbrush was missing from its usual place. After she and her grandfather checked the area around the house and didn't find Sarah there, the aunt decided to call her mother. The woman immediately came to them and they contacted the police. Officers arrived on the scene and first began to look around the house on their own. Sarah's aunt said that every day before she went to bed, she checked to make sure all the doors and windows were locked, and last night she made sure they were as well. Police officers looked all over the place, but Sarah was nowhere to be found. Given that the girl's toothbrush was missing from the house, they immediately began to consider a possible kidnapping. They soon found further confirmation of this theory. The officers double-checked whether all the windows and doors in the house were indeed closed. When the police went to the back door, next to which was Sarah's room, and pulled the handle, it opened. The girl's aunt assured them that that door had been locked the previous night, and it hadn't been opened since. However, she quickly remembered that they kept a spare key in front of the door on the street side. The woman immediately went to check if it was there, and to her horror, she discovered that the key was not there. This only reinforced the theory of a kidnapping. Given that the perpetrator knew the location of the key, he must have been well acquainted with her family. There was another fact in favor of that. Their dog didn't make a sound that night, although he always barked at strangers. Based on all this, the investigators immediately began a large-scale search for the girl. News of Sarah's disappearance instantly spread through the neighborhood, and many people expressed their desire to help the police. The sheriff reached out to them through the media, asking them to check their neighborhoods for anything suspicious. In addition, dozens of police officers instantly got involved. In addition to the fact that all members of the local police station were not at work, colleagues from neighboring cities and even states came to their aid. All of them hoped that the girl could be found alive. Given that the perpetrator had apparently taken her toothbrush, he might have planned to hold her somewhere, so the police threw all their energies into the search. In front of the house, the first clue awaited them. They noticed relatively fresh tire tracks in the snow and assumed that this was the vehicle the kidnapper had come in. All of Sarah's warm clothes were left in the house, so the perpetrator obviously could not have taken her away on foot. Meanwhile, Sarah's relatives were brought to the police station, and there something unexpected happened. The missing girl's 6-year-old sister, who was sleeping in the same room with her, pulled her grandmother by the sleeve and whispered that she had a secret. She had seen the man who had taken Sarah. According to the girl, she woke up to the man saying something to her sister. Emma did not understand what was happening, but she became scared, so the girl pretended to be asleep. A while later, she saw that the man had left the room with Sarah. This story shocked her relatives, but next they were in for an even bigger shock. Emma said that she recognized the man. It was Mr. Tommy. The adults immediately realized who they were talking about. It was 30-year-old Thomas Lex, Aunt Sarah's ex-boyfriend. They'd broken up a few months ago, but until then the man had spent time at her house, and all the kids knew him well. But the police knew Thomas even better, as he had an impressive criminal history. Over the years, he had been on their radar for crimes involving the abuse of women and girls. The first time he went to jail was when he was 18 years old. At that time, Thomas abused a 12-year-old girl and received 4 years in prison, but was released after just a few months early. The man was later sentenced to 7 years in prison for abusing another minor, but for some reason, he was again released early after only 6 months in prison for good behavior, and was on the outside. Shortly thereafter, he received another 6 months for abusing another girl. He also attempted to assault another girl on the very day his wife came home with his newborn daughter from the hospital. That wife later divorced him and obtained a restraining order against Thomas because he had threatened to kill her and their daughter. Another incident occurred after a woman and her young daughter moved into the same street with him. The girl and her friend were sitting on the porch of her house, and at one point Thomas approached them. He told one of them that he had been watching her play in the yard and called her a wild girl. He then grabbed a branch and started hitting her on the buttocks. The girl ran home and told her mom what had happened. The woman spotted Thomas through the window and realized she had seen his face before. Before moving in, she went to the rapist registry registered in her new neighborhood, and Thomas's picture was there. The mother went to the police and the case went to court. However, Thomas managed to get away with it. Before the trial began, the woman was asked not to mention the fact that Thomas was on the rapist register and had previously been tried for abuse. The reason for this request was the concern that the trial would then be biased and Thomas might receive an unfair sentence. Just a few months before Sarah's disappearance, Thomas was again on the police's radar. He had snuck into the 24-year-old woman's bedroom in the middle of the night, stripped, and began satisfying himself while standing next to her bed. The man was arrested, but he posted bail and was released pending trial. Thomas successfully hid his criminal history from Aunt Sarah, but one day she found out about his crimes anyway. Yet the man somehow managed to convince her that the allegations were false, and that he hadn't actually done any of the things they accused him of. Given all of the above, Detectives had no doubt that Thomas was the one behind Sarah's abduction. Her relatives also noted that back in the days when the man had been dating her aunt, he had paid considerably more attention to Sarah. At the time, no one paid much attention to it. But after the girl's disappearance, this fact seemed quite disturbing. The police immediately went to Thomas's house to question him. The man lived only a few kilometers away, in a shed on the property of his parents. Investigators took him in for questioning and then obtained a search warrant for the shed. It was a mess and terrible living conditions, but no evidence was found linking it to Sarah's disappearance. However, the police found a huge number of magazines and DVDs with intimate content. The shed was literally littered with them. When questioned, Thomas immediately began to deny his involvement in Sarah's disappearance. He stated that he was trying to cope with his problems, referring to the urge to commit crimes against girls. According to Thomas, during the times when he was dating Sarah's aunt, he deliberately did not stay alone with the children so that no one could falsely accuse him of anything inappropriate. When he was told that Emma had seen him the night of the kidnapping, Thomas claimed that the girl had often made up stories before. The detectives didn't believe a word he said, and it wasn't just Thomas's criminal record. When talking about the disappearance of 11-year-old Sarah, he smiled and mocked. The sheriff thought at the time that Thomas thought his crime was perfect, and the cops wouldn't be able to prove his guilt. Nevertheless, the man claimed to have an undeniable alibi. That night, he was allegedly at the bar with his friend until well into the night. Investigators immediately checked this information, and to their surprise, this alibi was confirmed. Thomas had indeed been seen at the bar, but there was a catch. He left there at about 1 a.m., and since then, no one, including his parents, saw the man until 7 in the morning. Remarkably, while examining his phone, they discovered that Thomas had texted several women he knew that night and asked them to meet up, but they all declined. Nevertheless, detectives were never able to crack Thomas. They hoped the girl was still alive, so they threw all their energies into searching for her. Upon seizing the suspect's pickup truck, police officers immediately discovered some serious clues. Inside the vehicle was Sarah's very green toothbrush, as well as a large lollipop. Investigators allowed that Thomas could have used the candy to lure the girl into the car. In addition, the tire tracks of the pickup truck completely matched the tracks left in the snow in front of the house on the night of Sarah's disappearance. The man himself had told detectives that he hadn't been to the house in over a month, and now they had confirmation of the falsity of his words. With the suspect continuing to deny everything, the police were left with the hope of finding Sarah on their own. Several hundred officers and volunteers began searching the area, scouring the area within a kilometer radius of her home. They checked abandoned buildings, forests, ravines, and bodies of water. Kinologists with search dogs tried to catch the girl's trail, and from the air, the territory was inspected by helicopters. From the very first day, the case received a tremendous response from the locals. They came to the police station and signed up to volunteer, despite the bad weather and the approaching holidays. Unfortunately, that day's search never yielded any results. But the police officers didn't think of giving up and went out to look for her again with the first rays of the next day's sun. Throughout this time, the flow of concerned locals did not just not dwindle, but only increased. A total of 3,000 people joined the search. The sheriff even had to move the headquarters to the territory of a large baseball stadium, because the police station simply could not accommodate such a large number of people. It is noteworthy that among the volunteers were not only adults, but also their children. They distributed water, hot tea, and food to the people. Everyone tried to do their part, hoping that it would eventually help them find Sarah alive. Meanwhile, investigators had obtained the first piece of unequivocal evidence that linked Thomas to the kidnapping. Once the man was brought to the station, he was given a new set of clothes, and his own was turned over to the lab. The experts found third-party DNA on the suspect's underwear and matched it with a sample of Sarah's that they got from the girl's belongings. The results showed a complete match. Given the location where the DNA was found, detectives came to a disappointing conclusion. In all likelihood, Thomas had abused Sarah after the abduction. The second day of the search also yielded no results. And on the morning of December 25th and Christmas Day, thousands of people once again took to the streets. Despite the holiday, none of them even thought of leaving the case. That same day, investigators received the location of Thomas's cell phone. Unfortunately, it was not an exact geolocation, but only information about his phone's connection to cell towers. Police found that he was connecting to 3 towers on the night of Sarah's disappearance, so they were able to determine the approximate area where the man was supposed to be. Investigators concentrated all their efforts in this area, which was practically on the border of the state, about 14 kilometers from Sarah's aunt's house. It was mostly woods and numerous narrow paths. Hundreds of people scoured every meter of this area, hoping that they would get a Christmas miracle and Sarah would turn out to be alive. But unfortunately, the reality was much sadder. At about 4 in the afternoon, police officers spotted the girl's body on the ground, almost at the very border of the state. She was lying on her back, and her arms were twisted so that she was left raised up and pointing to the sky. When medical examiners began examining the body, they were in for an unspeakable shock. First, they confirmed that the girl had been abused. Secondly, they found signs of strangulation, but determined that the perpetrator had failed to kill her that way. Experts found dirt in the victim's lungs and concluded that she had been tried to drown in a puddle. Apparently, the victim lost consciousness at this time. She suffered severe burns afterward. According to investigators, the perpetrator left her lying in those woods for a while, went to get a can of gasoline and set Sarah on fire. Traces of smoke were found in her lungs that would indicate that she was still alive at that point. It also explained why the deceased's hands were raised and pointing to the sky. This kind of thing sometimes happens when a person is exposed to fire. Such extreme brutality shocked everyone involved in the case. Even the detectives found it hard to believe that all these atrocities had really been done to the girl. However, now that they knew what had happened to Sarah, they all wanted only one thing: to get the death penalty for Thomas. Although he still refused to admit guilt, there was an impressive amount of evidence against him. Already after the discovery of the body, the forensic experts who examined his pickup truck in more detail found some of Sarah's hair and pieces of fabric from her pajamas in the front seat, which also proved Thomas's involvement in the kidnapping. Together with all the other evidence, it made it virtually impossible for him to get away with it. The trial had been pending for more than a year. However, it never began. At the beginning of 2011, the prosecution decided to offer Thomas a deal in which he would plead guilty and receive a life sentence instead of execution. Considering what he had done to Sarah, this deal might seem unfair. However, there were some very strong arguments in favor of this decision. Chief among them was that the victim's younger sister would have to appear at the trial in the presence of the murderer and testify multiple times. The kidnapping and death of her sister was a serious test for her psyche, and the trial could affect the girl even more. Another reason to offer a deal was that the prosecution could not be 100% sure of a death sentence. If Thomas's lawyers had secured a different sentence, the man might have had the opportunity to get out early, and the terms of the deal did not imply such an option under any circumstances. In addition, the state's governor was opposed to the death penalty at the time, which also reduced the chances of that sentence being imposed. In the end, Thomas agreed and told the detectives everything they already knew without him. The man admitted that he tricked the girl into leaving the house with them, then drove her far away, abused, and killed her. He ended up receiving 2 life sentences with no chance of getting out, and was transferred to a maximum security prison. In the first few days, One of the inmates attacked him with a shiv during lunch, inflicting several serious cuts on Thomas. He survived, however, and the prison staff took extra measures to protect the criminal from other inmates who dreamed of getting to him. Sarah's case caused a serious wave of outrage, as the system time after time allowed Thomas to get out and continue committing crimes. The state of Maryland eventually passed Sarah's law, which requires anyone convicted of child abuse to sit in prison for a minimum of 15 years before they have a chance to go free. Share your opinion on this story in the comments, and don't forget to give it a like if you like this video. I also recommend subscribing to our Telegram channel, where we publish daily the most interesting crime news from around the world without censorship. Thank you for watching.